Hey there, this is Dan from Virtual World Dynamics, and in this session we're going to verify that your VWD installation is working properly. After installing VWD, we can go through a simple scene scenario to verify that your system is working properly. First we'll do the DAZ session, then we'll do Poser. As we start this session, we assume that you have run through an installation process as per the instructions or the installation videos, and we assume that your VWD is actually installed as it should be, and now we're just going to test it. So please note that there will be very little explanation of the process we're going through, and we'll skip any configuration steps since we simply want to see if the system is working at all. Workflow and function details are described in the documentation, and we'll get to that stuff later. The steps we're going to go through first are to find and open our simple DAZ Studio test scene. Then we'll start VWD. We'll import the sphere as a collision item and the plane as a dynamic actor or a cloth item. And then we'll run the simulation and return back to DAZ Studio or Poser. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is find the VWD scripts and the test scenes that we'll be using for this verification. And there's VWD, and right above it you have a folder with a couple of simple test scenes. The first one we're going to use is the plane and sphere, where we take the sphere as a hard item and the plane and turn it into a cloth item, and we'll import these into VWD. Alright, so to import into VWD, let's start it up. You've got a plane and a sphere. You should see both of those up in the scene import. Hit host list if you need to refresh that. And what we're going to do is select the sphere. We're going to press the collision button. And while we could set options here, normally what we'll do is just go ahead and hit collision twice. It'll use the defaults, and for our purposes for this test, that should be fine. Now I click the scene viewer header bar, and it makes the scene viewer full screen. Click it again, it'll shrink again. I want to select the plane now, and I want to import that as a cloth item, not using the insistent this time, but just click it once. Again, like the sphere, we'll go ahead and assume the defaults, and don't do any setting changes. It'll import the plane. It is now a piece of cloth in this scene. We'll right-click and drag on that background in order to see the two items. Now, with these two items, a cloth item and a collision item, a dynamic actor and a collision item, let's go ahead and open up the Simulate tab. Noting immediately that the default simulator engine at this point is my graphics NVIDIA GeForce card. I actually want to run this with the CPU, and that's how you change it. You click the Use Multi-Thread to enable your CPU, which is reliable across all machines. GPUs sometimes act a little flaky. So in this test context, press that button, go up above it, and hit the Start Static Simulation button, the simplest kind of simulation we can do, which is static, not animated. Press that button, and voila! If your system is installed and working correctly, you should see your plane mesh turn into a piece of flowing cloth, and the simulation should run for as long as you don't press the Stop Static Simulation button. It'll settle and maybe stop doing things, but it will keep running until you press that Stop button. Once you press the Stop button, you can then send this to the base host system underneath it, Poser or DAZ Studio in our case, and we'll shrink the simulation window up at the top there. And notice it's still up in the corner. It's a smaller window, but now we are in DAZ Studio. You can see that the draped plane is now sitting, and you can exit VWD. You've done your initial job. That means it worked, and your system is pretty much set up like it's supposed to be. So let's do the same thing for Poser users. The first thing we have to do from an empty scene is load the equivalent plane and sphere scene, which is included rather than in a runtime. It's included in the VWD folder under Working Files, Scenes, and you'll see a Poser plane and sphere scene. If you load that up, find that and load that, the next thing we'll do similarly is start VWD. using the load the Python buttons as described in the previous video. It'll bring up a new menu and we can start VWD. You'll see similarly the plane and the sphere. We'll load the sphere first. As a collision item, hit collision twice, load the plane. As a cloth item, hit cloth twice. It'll load both of those. We'll open up the full view as we did. Right click on the background and just drag it around. See the scene. Simulate tab is open on the side there. We'll head over there and start the simulation. Now I did it with the GPU in this case. Should look pretty much the same. I hit stop. I'll hit send pose to host. Shrink the window. Looks like poser received it properly. Let's go ahead and close VWD. And if you see what I just did, your system set up and ready to go. I hope this helped.